Hello and welcome to Waba Cottage Museum, the virtual tour. We're situated just off of Burnstown Road here near White Lake Village. Many of you might be familiar with our boat launch, but have you ever actually been inside our beautiful museum? This is actually the historic grounds and a facsimile of the original building of Archibald McNab, the founder of McNab Braeside, the infamous man, but his story is fascinating, along with many other fascinating stories from people around here in the Ottawa Valley. So I'd be thrilled if you continue to watch this video, or better yet, came and visited, so we can share those stories with you. The story of McNab Township begins the way many great stories do, and that's, of course, with a get-rich scheme. Archibald McNab was the 13th layer of Clan McNab of Scotland, inheriting the associated exuberance, pride, and tremendous financial difficulties from this real looker of a man, his Uncle Francis. As the story goes, the debt collectors came knocking on Archie's front door, so Archie ran out the back door, and ran he did, all the way to Upper Canada, effectively ditching both the debt collectors and his wife and kids in the process. In Upper Canada, Archie managed to schmooze his way in with the higher-ups, and more importantly, get his hands on some of that sweet grant money given to him in order to colonize Wilmot Township, which he very inventively renamed to McNab Township. In 1825, 21 families moved from Perthshire, Scotland, to the McNab Township, where they would learn that Archie is the world's worst landlord. Upon arriving, Archie made them sign a bond that essentially indebted themselves to Archie. Among other things, the bond required them to pay exorbitant prices on farmland, and even prohibited them from leaving the township unless with Archie's explicit permission, likely to prevent them from realizing just how bad they had it. Throughout the 1830s, complaints against Archie mounted, but would remain largely ignored due to the government not wanting to shake the boat on their own authority. Until 1841, though, when Archie became such an embarrassment that they had to buy him out. With his new money, Archie left the township and once again abandoned his common-law wife and their children and moved in with his cousin Al in Hamilton. He wore out his welcome in Hamilton, so he moved back to Europe and at the age of 78 got with an 18-year-old. What a man. White Lake, while a beautiful place to visit, is not necessarily known for its saltwater marine life. So, imagine Alan Jones's surprise back in 1975 when digging between Burnstown and White Lake, he found the bones of a bowhead whale. And in fact, since then, many other bones of whales have been found in and around the Ottawa Valley. The whales would have lived in the Champlain Sea, which covered most of Ottawa and extended back towards Montreal and beyond. It formed about 12,000 years ago after the most recent ice age, but the real mystery surrounds why the ice melted in the first place. It melted much too quickly to simply be due to climate change. One theory that's been gaining some attention is that it was actually a meteor, or many meteors, hitting the glaciers, which caused a shift in currents, which then caused the ice to melt rapidly. This meteor could have played a part in the extinction of many large mammals, including the woolly mammoth and the Clovis people who lived in North America before the Native Americans. Either way, it's just pretty wicked to say that we have whales in the Ottawa Valley. This is one of the first Canadian War Medals awarded to William Yuill, grandson of Old Archie, for his role in the Wolseley expedition that was sent to Red River colonies during the first Riel rebellion of 1870. And if you don't know anything about history, what I just said were a bunch of words, so let me break that down for you. The Red River colonies, and what we now call Manitoba, were in the 1800s mainly inhabited by Métis people, specifically French-speaking Roman Catholic Métis people. Prior to the 1860s, the land was owned by the Hudson Bay Company, but during the 1860s, sovereignty began to be passed to the province of Canada, which spelled bad news for the Métis people. For one, this led to an influx of English-speaking Protestants from Ontario, who were not the most accepting of the Métis people and were not afraid to push rather harshly for the prominence of their own customs and tradition. Naturally, the Métis were afraid of losing their religion, culture, and language due to the influx of these Protestants. These issues were potentiated when, in 1869, the government attempted to resurvey the land to the new seigneurial system, which, despite assurances, ran the risk of removing the Métis people from their own land. Having enough of being pushed around, in steps Louis Riel to act as a Métis spokesperson. He successfully formed a provisional government and prevented Canada from gaining control over the Red colonies in 1869. Unfortunately, he made a rather large misstep in 1870 when he executed Thomas Scott, a Protestant protester who had been previously arrested. This resulted in heightening conflict between the Protestants and the Métis, and eventually led to the Canadian government being able to make a deal with the Métis, forming the province of Manitoba and promising to respect the land of the Métis and reserve land for their children. A promise that was, unfortunately, but rather predictably, ignored and abused by later governmental authorities. The Wolseley expedition, consisting of British soldiers and even volunteers such as Yuill himself, was sent to the Red River colonies to oversee the transfer of power to the government of Canada in 1870. Riel, having not been given amnesty for his execution of Thomas Scott, was forced to flee. Riel would go on to form another rebellion in Saskatchewan in defense of the Métis people there, and in 1885 he'd be executed for high treason. Originally, historians brandished Riel as nothing more than an instigator and a rebel, but recently has been given a lot more recognition for his role as a protector and a hero to the Métis people. I think I speak for all of us when I say, thank God for indoor plumbing. Till the 1850s and until even later in rural Canada, outhouses, chamber pots, sometimes even with the added luxury of a commode chair, were what were primarily used to dispose of human waste. It may interest you to know then that indoor plumbing has actually existed since the Bronze Age, and the first flushable toilet was invented in 1596 by the godson of Queen Elizabeth I, Sir John Harrington. It was in the urbanizing 19th century that eventually changed the preference to these more modern means of disposal, particularly in London. While London's population boomed during this time period, the amount of toilets did not, meaning that many families had to share the same privy. This resulted in sewage spilling into the streets and, the drinking water, causing many deaths due to typhoid and cholera. As a response, it was decreed that every household should have their own privy, to be cleaned by the unfortunate soul giving the position of night soil man. So, problem solved! Except the sewer system in London was still absolutely abysmal and sewage was still leaking everywhere. This became really apparent after a particularly warm summer in 1858, where the sewage really began to rot. This resulted in the very descriptively named event called the Great Stink. Whether it was the increase in case of cholera or the truly horrendous smell, the Great Stink did manage to convince the city to reconstruct a newer sewer system, which opened the door for the hilariously named Thomas Crapper to market the modern toilet. Little extra trivia for you, while the name Crapper does come from Old Thomas, the term crap actually predates him, being derived from the Old French word for to reject waste. The ticker tape telegraph was a sort of primitive printer and the first electrical communicator used in finances. It was used for about 100 years from 1870 to 1970 and really changed the game when it came to the stock market. While before getting the best price was dependent on being the fastest runner, the ticker tape allowed for quick communication across the country. In fact, the ticker tapes are found everywhere. They could be found in many common stores and pubs that had nothing to do with finances, and the number of Americans owning stocks from 1900 to 1922 more than tripled. The mysterious and almost random movements of the stock market were addictive, causing many people to invest big, hoping to make it big, but risk losing it all. In 1908, the term speculitis was used to describe the physical weakening and the decrease in judgmental abilities for people obsessing over the ticker tape in the stock market. But hey, it's not all greed and mental illness. In Manhattan, the paper used in the ticker tape telegraph was often used as confetti in ticker tape parades, which were a way to celebrate joyous occasions like the end of the World Wars. Okay, that's the end of our virtual tour. I hope you've learned a little bit about the history of the Ottawa Valley and how it connects to the world as a whole. We've got so much more to share than a 10-minute video will allow, so I encourage you to come on down. We're open Thursdays to Monday, 10 to 4, and thanks for watching.